Hey everyone, this is Sean Ulansky. Thanks for joining me today as we discuss my capstone thesis determining the likelihood of bringing gray wolves back from extirpation in Colorado. The research questions that we will be addressing in this thesis. First, what in the ecosystem selected for reintroduction has changed in the time that wolves have been absent? We'll also be looking at how will changes in the ecosystem impact the ability of wolves to successfully reestablish themselves, and how will the ecosystem respond to the appearance of a novel predator. Justification for these research questions focuses largely on a few key things, namely, while gray wolves were once found across the entire state of Colorado, they were hunted to local extinction in the 1940s. The state has not had a wolf population until the year 2021, when migrants from Wyoming established a small pack in the northern portion of the state. That same year, a law was written that requires Colorado Parks and Wildlife to introduce wolves to the state by the end of 2023. However, in the near century-long period that wolves were absent, grizzly bears were also extirpated from the state, moose were introduced to the state, and with all of that, very little research has been done on ecological responses to wolf reintroductions outside of national parks. The trophic cascade theory put forth is being used as a large justification for why this reintroduction can succeed. However, it does not factor in the human-wildlife conflicts that will happen outside of a natural park or wilderness area setting, as we see in Yellowstone and Isle Royale. My hypothesis is that if behavioral changes of extant species in areas where wolves are currently present are not so drastically different from those where they are absent as to preclude wolves from occupying an ecological niche, then the de-extinction is likely to succeed. This hypothesis was actually revised as of the compilation of this presentation. Initially, I was looking at timing of ecosystem adaptations. However, I think that was too broad. The current working hypothesis more directly addresses the concerns of my study. As discussed, wolves were removed from Colorado in the 1940s. Since then, a pack has colonized an area in northern Colorado. Again, Colorado law now mandates that wolves be reintroduced by the end of the year 2023. And they are using the trophic cascade theory as justification for that legal action. But wolves may not be solely responsible for the effects that we see in Yellowstone in terms of riparian zone recovery. There may have been other factors happening in the park at that time that pushed along the changes that have been attributed solely to wolves. Current research focus outside of national parks looks heavily at livestock depredations, particularly cattle and sheep. It's an important consideration as people and domestic animals are a significant part of the anthrome into which these wolves will be reintroduced. They do not have the free reign and lack of interference that they would have in a national park the size of Yellowstone. Colorado national parks are significantly smaller. Rocky Mountain National Park is about 1/8 the size of Yellowstone National Park. Sources of data will be mixed methods. We'll be relying partly on meta-analysis of existing literature, as well as analysis of primary source data collected from my field observations and interviews with ranchers and wildlife officials. Literature review of journal articles is going to be another factor. I do have contacts with state and federal agencies. Travis Duncan is the State Public Information Officer for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Additionally, I have been in contact with Scott Becker of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He has offered his assistance at the federal level to answer any questions he can. The fieldwork will involve live observation of species that will provide wolf forage as well as competitive predators. We'll use camera traps to establish patterns of behavior uh, and compare those to patterns identified in the literature. Some of these will be locally variable and are not currently recorded. The behaviors will be documented in areas inhabited by wolves as well as those that still are devoid of them. Wolf behavior, of course, will be documented in the same fashion. Additionally, scat sampling will be conducted to determine diets of carnivores in both environments. Statistical models will also play a key factor in this. Data will be analyzed to determine patterns of depredation based on geography and ecology of areas inhabited by wolves, including levels of human occupation. Once the patterns are established, we will build tables to document our findings. Tables can be arranged in such a way that column headings may be things such as presence or absence of wolves, rows being labeled by plant species name with and without wolf present. We will also generate statistical models using software such as R and MATLAB. I have access to both of those. The significance of this research is the most important piece of this thesis. There is, again, little existing research in anthromes as far as how wolves will interact. We don't know if we'll see something similar to what happened in the South Selkirk Mountains, where the local woodland caribou were actually driven to extinction by the wolf presence, not because the wolves didn't belong, not because the caribou didn't belong, but because the environment had been altered and other animals brought in, which bridged a gap, providing wolves access to the caribou. These are things that need to be considered that haven't been to date. Along with that information, we know that we will be informing future reintroduction efforts. As ecologists and politicians look closer and closer at what is happening in the absence of particularly large charismatic megafauna, predators are a, a big focus when you think about grizzly bears and wolves. But there are a lot of questions that need to be asked before these, we'll consider it a de-extinction, before these de-extinctions take place. We're not asking ourselves why did the animals go extinct to begin with, nor are we considering how much available habitat there is if we were to bring them back. Another big question is if there is a compelling reason to do so. Wolves may or may not have left a void when they were extirpated. That void may or may not have been filled. A significant piece of this study will be answering those questions to determine what the likelihood of the success of both the wolves and the ecosystems will be. The following sources were referenced in the compilation of this presentation. I encourage you, if you have further questions, to either reach out to me or consult these sources.